bringing things to the final segment of this episode. This is going to be a new thing that we're going to be talking about ideally every episode, and it's called Matches You Need to See. So what we're going to be doing is every episode we'll take it in turns to pick out a match that we think that you should be watching at home, whether it's a mat classic or one that's just got some great comedy in it. Could even be a match that is just such a train wreck that you just have to see it for yourself to believe it. So I'm going first on this episode, and I've picked a match that's very near and dear to me because this was the match that essentially got me into wrestling, and it is the six-man Hell in a Cell match from Armageddon 2000 featuring The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Kurt Angle, The Undertaker, Triple H, and Rikishi for the WWE Championship. And yeah, like I said, this was the match that got me into wrestling, and it fits perfectly well at this current present in time because it's basically nearly 20 years since I first saw this match. So I would have just been 7 years old at the time, and it was quite a touching thing. It was a sort of passing of the torch moment kind of thing because my brother was a wrestling fan back when he was a kid into his teens, so he would have been well into his teenage years at this point and was kind of getting out of wrestling. But I remember vividly he must have recorded it off the TV because we had it on a VHS tape, and I remember him showing. I don't remember much of the card from that first watching. I think he just skipped through most of it, but talk about a perfect show to kind of get me into wrestling because he kept stopping occasionally because they had segments of the previous Cell matches up to that point. So one of my first memories was Mick Foley getting chucked off the top of the Hell in the Cell, and as a 7-year-old, my mind was just completely blown as to what this was. And yeah, from there it just kind of basically made me the lifelong fan that I am to this day. Had you seen the match before we picked it for the show?
Yes, very long time ago. I think that was probably one of the matches I saw on tape way, way back when.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how I obviously got my eyes to it. I mean, whether he recorded for the TV or not, I just remember having the VHS tape, and afterwards I just re-watched it over and over again until it was probably worn out. But it's one of those Cell matches that people don't look back on as fondly because, in truth, even I can admit that it is kind of a car wreck in the terms that there is just so much going on. It's hard to keep up with, but I think it's a car crash in all the best ways. There's the action that's going on, and it's kind of like the perfect summation of an Attitude Era match, because you think at this point the year 2000 was kind of a big banner year for WWE. I mean, this is when the Attitude Era was probably at its apex, and then after this it would go into 2001, which was kind of the bow out year for the Attitude Era. And when you think about the shows that followed this, after this you had the 2001 Royal Rumble, then you had No Way Out, then you had Mania 17, so it was one hell of a hot streak for WWE pay-per-views.
Yeah, the one thing when I was rewatching it that I didn't really, I just saw a lot of big names as a kid, and I was like, this is amazing, this is great. But the one thing that strikes me is I'm trying to think of another match, like a single match, that has as many big names and as many icons and charismatic people as that match has. Like when you're in a match where the eighth weakest person in the match is Rikishi, you've got a really good goddamn match right there. Because Rikishi, I love Rikishi, but you've got I'm counting 8 because Vince came out and Cactus Jack came out, Mankind.
Foley came out, yeah. I think you're right. You can't. There is certainly not many examples of a match that has this star caliber attached to it. Essentially, again, I love Rikishi as well, but he's kind of the odd man out of this lineup. But even then, at the time, he was in sort of the main spots, because this is what's completely crazy about the match as well. I don't think there's ever been another match that tried to combine 3 storylines into a big finale, because at this point you had they'd come off the back of the Austin hit and run thing, which was originally him and Rikishi, until you found out it was Triple H, so that ignited that feud. You had the spill off of that where it was The Rock and Rikishi feuding because Rikishi said he did it for The Rock, and then you had Kurt Angle and Undertaker, which was basically centered around the fact that Kurt Angle messed up his bike and bought him a moped as a replacement. So they were like the three bigger stories of that year that were kind of all thrown together for one big ending, which again, I don't think they've ever really kind of attempted that kind of thing since.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that you can have a match with 6 people where if you paired every single one person with another person in like a singles match, it's a dream match practically every time. Like, God, I mean, even just having The Rock and Austin in there is madness. And then you add Angle, who's one of the greatest like pure wrestlers ever. You had the Dead Man version of Undertaker. Obviously, Undertaker being the greatest character ever in all of wrestling.
Well, no, this would have been the American Badass Taker.
Yeah, well, Dead Man Inc., I guess.
Dead Man Inc., yeah.
I said Dead Man. I meant Dead Man Inc. But the match itself, it starts as most of these matches do. You're just hitting people.
Well, before...
Oh, yeah, sorry, continue.
Before we get to that, I don't know if you caught it, but this match has probably one of the best opening hype videos, like, ever. Like, I think it's just mainly a thing that the Attitude Era, and probably is even at the Ruthless Aggression, you don't see opening hype videos like this anymore. Like, they use the... I tried to find the name of the score, but I can't remember it. But it's like a very sort of... operatic, orchestral, famous score that they have over the top of this action, and what's great about these hype packages is that there's 3 storylines here, but then they combine them into this one mega storyline. So going into it, you have Vince not wanting this match to go ahead because he thinks it's going to be a bad investment having 6 of his top stars in it getting injured, but them all beating the crap out of him because they want to be part of it. And the big thing going in, this is when Mick Foley was commissioner, and he said if someone got seriously injured, he would resign, which goes in after the show. So yeah, the hype package to this match in particular is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, the hype packages are somewhat a lost art, and it's strange because WWE still have the team to be able to pull them out of the bag. AEW are doing a few very cool things that way, but yeah, I mean nothing lives up to My Way or the Highway.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just a thing that kind of lived and died with the 90s and early 2000s. I think given like the culture at the time, the videos fit quite well because they're very fast and energetic and get you pumped up. And I mean, I think they could still fit with that demographic in this day and age, but I think, yeah, it is something that's just been massively lost over time, which I always hope we'll get to see a return to. But yeah, so you were saying about the start of the match.
Yeah. I guess let's go like a few beat for beat type things. It starts off much like these matches do. It's just a brawl. Everyone kind of fighting with everyone. I mean, I guess there's 3 stages of it. They start in the cell. They move outside of the cell. They move on top of the cell. Well, 4 stages. On top of the cell. And then they head back to the ring.
Yeah. I mean, like I say on the start of the match, it is just from the word go as soon as Austin blindsides Angle outside the cell, it is just full pelt. Like, it just doesn't slow down. And I think you've got to at least give as much props as you can to the camera crew, because I imagine it's a ball ache of a task filming just a standard one-on-one cell match. Then you throw in 4 other dudes, and they're all scrapping across the thing. Like, props to them for covering as much as the action as they could, because I would have not liked to have been a cameraman on that day trying to capture all the big spots of that match.
Oh yeah, there's points where Austin is like, it's as if he's walking through the cameraman on the corners when he's messing up Triple H. One of the things that I think is just so great about all 6 of the men that were in the match is you talk about Austin fighting Angle on the outside, like because Angle doesn't want to go into the cage, and each character that comes in has their own so well defined mood and sort of mindset going in. It comes off so well. And then obviously, match starts and it's brutal as absolute fuck. One of my favorite spots from it is just like how good they are at the pageantry of it, at showing it off, at the like it's a panto type thing, where Austin gets Triple H and he just grinds his face against the cell, and he does it a few times, and he keeps going, and then finally he decides, I'm gonna rub his face on this wire on every single wall, and he just leads him all the way around the cell. It's so great because it's like a Mexican wave of the crowd as they cheer as he goes by. It's so good.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like one of my favorite spots of it. It's just like he's clearly just dominating Triple H enough as it is, but then he just thinks, well, fuck it. If I'm already doing this, I'm just gonna go for a whole lap of the cage. It's just outrageous. I think the selling in this match is really good as well. Like, I think it's one of those matches as well where it could be easy, given the names involved, that some dominate more than others. But I think everyone gets a good moment of like getting the licks in as well. It's very back and forth for a lot of it, especially with Austin and Triple H. So obviously when they eventually, because this is the one thing that doesn't make sense about the match. So as mentioned, the big story going into it is Vince didn't want this match to go ahead. So like he comes out with the Stooges and a truck intending to pull the cell down to stop the match, which makes little to no sense because he would essentially be dropping the thing on the talent and doing exactly what he doesn't want to happen.
Not just that, on the audience as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it just makes it doesn't make much sense other than a way of just getting the door off the hinges so they can spill outside. But then again, when that does happen, Triple H has mainly had his ass kicked inside the cell, but then he drops Austin's head right through the car windshield. So, no, through the car door, sorry. And I think one of my favourite spots in that, which they did replicate a few times, is when they've made their way up to the entranceway, which was so 2000s, but it's when Austin gets that kind of boom camera and just launches it into Triple H.
Oh, yeah, the big crane arm camera just throws it straight into him, yeah.
Yeah, they do that spot a few times because then it's just purely for the fact you get the replay of that camera, and then it just basically looks like a crazy roller coaster ride that's just clashed into somebody. I just love that little thing. I don't know why. It's just really fun. And again, like, I mean, imagine being these performers and then you've got to wrestle on these junked out cars as well. Like, the amount of windshields and windows. I think literally everyone in this match takes a spot of going through some kind of car window.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you've got... Because in wrestling, you've got these over-exaggerated moves. It's much like the difference between a play and a movie, where in a movie you do a punch and then you edit it in, but in a play you've got to wind back, you've got to pull forward. It's the pageantry of it. It's like letting people know what you're doing. There's a point where Austin is fighting Trips by the cars, and he picks up a massive barrel like goddamn Donkey Kong, and he leans back to like swing into him, and he literally, the weight of the barrel tips him all the way backwards, and he falls onto the car, and then he still like heaves it forward, doesn't even bring it close to his body. He's still like extended out all the way down, swing down, hits the car. That's perfect. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Just tries to yeet that fucking thing, and like it's like one of those things where people point out, it's like, well, that must have been a fake barrel. It's like, no, you can tell by the way he's really struggling to lift that thing, and by the way it lands, that if that had fucked up and he'd actually hit him, you would have seriously fucking hurt him.
Yeah, it was close as well. He rolled right at the right time. It was great.
Yeah, it was really well done. Because I mean, it's the thing with this match is that if you're coming here for this match to see moves, you're gonna probably be very disappointed, because like the whole point of this is it's just a brawl. Like it's meant to be this big blow off match where they're basically just gonna literally try and kill each other. They're not gonna wrestle. They're put in a match where, because this is the thing, they're still at this point, Hell in the Cell was the big blow-off match, because this is the second one they had this year. This was the same year where you had the Cactus Jack Triple H one from No Mercy, which retired, making I use finger quotations for that. But even then, like at this point, this must have only been maybe the 5th or 6th cell match. At this point, it still had that reputation of being their most brutal stipulation, and I think the reason why this one shouldn't be so overlooked is that this kind of proves it, because they do just go absolute hell for leather throughout, and I think every single one of them's bleeding by the end of the match.
Yeah, in terms of like, if you're looking for moves in this kind of thing, it's just not going to happen. You get, in these kind of matches, you get punches, big spots, and finishing moves. That's about it. And that's honestly all you need. There was enough story being told. Eventually, when they work their way back, and they do that spot in multi-man matches that they often do, where it's trading finishes, the crowd is so hot for it. And I was as well when I was watching.
Yeah, absolutely. I think before we get into that, I think one thing I love about this was when I rewatched it not long ago was I never realized how much I missed the old look of that original cell, because it's clear that must have been the same one that they'd used the previous matches, and you just get the image of like how battle worn that cell was. Like you see the one now, and like, to be fair, I do like the red one. I think it looks pretty cool, but with that one, you generally got the grandiose of the match because you saw like the rips in the mesh.
There's history to it.
You could feel, yeah, exactly. You can feel the history coming off it.
I think that's one of the biggest problems with Hell in a Cell being a pay-per-view and not being a gimmicked match that comes out, because you're just expecting it. It's like, yeah, you're gonna bring out the freshly painted Cell that we all know, and bruh, yeah.
I mean, again, like we're never going to see the days, because I mean, the thing was with the Cell match by that point is that it became a foregone conclusion that someone was probably going to fall off it at some point, which does happen in this match, even though they did obviously try to do it as safely as possible, which we'll get to. But yeah, it's just so good to me. I think a lot of people have a gripe with the ending, because obviously not only was the truck there as a setup to pull off the door, but what I quite liked about with that ending of Rikishi going over the top is that they do kind of tease a lot about who might be going off, because I think eventually, maybe with the exception of The Rock, nearly everyone's on top, and they do kind of little teasers here and there about who might be going over. It looks pretty apparent that a lot of them are absolutely shitting themselves up there, which you would be given the history and the fact that this match has gone wrong for people in the past before, without, with Foley going through the roof and how that wasn't planned and stuff. So, but yeah, obviously it leads to the big climax. Well, it's obviously not the end, but it's like the big climax people are expecting, with Rikishi being limply, not even chokeslammed off, just kind of pushed off, which you kind of can't blame him for. Apparently with that, though, even though it's clear that they tried to give him a cushion landing, I think apparently it really did fuck his back up after that. I don't think it was the same again after that.
Yeah, watching it sure, they tried to gimmick it and make it soft, but the momentum just stop. That it didn't seem like there was that much padding, to be honest.
I literally think it was just sawdust. I don't know if there was anything else under that. Like, I could just see them thinking, like, what could we do to sort of cushion his landing? And then they just had bags of sawdust at hand, and were just like, yeah, that'll work. And clearly it wasn't enough, because when you see him hit the truck, you see it, like, the suspension on it, like, proper dip. So, yeah, I mean, props for him for taking that, and I hope it didn't fuck his back up too much following it. But apparently, yeah, it didn't do him any particular favours after that.
We suffer for our art.
We suffer for our art, indeed. Yeah, and then obviously going at the finish, that was, like I say, it was kind of what you wanted. It was very much... I love the finish, because obviously Kurt goes in as the champion of this, and you'd think the odds are stacked in his favour, and this was obviously his... He'd only debuted at the start of... Was the end of '99, wasn't it? So he'd essentially been on a full year at this point and done everything. but he was kind of the cowardly champion, and it was kind of like a good finish where you see them all hit the moves, and then at the end it's just Kurt limply rolling his arm over the top just to get the pinfall victory.
Yeah, I think it was really solid for the character. Doesn't make anyone look weak. It was just really, really solid finish. I mean, to the match that happened 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a match that I think, again, because 2000 was that year where the Attitude Era had probably reached its apex, and 2001's kind of the bow out. This seems like the most fitting match that you could point to as being like a defining match for the Attitude Era, because you had essentially pretty much 6 of the biggest names associated with it. Like, you can kind of say what you want about Rikishi, and the Hell in the Cell match, which was basically birthed in the Attitude Era. It's pretty overbooked in parts. The fact that they try to cram 3 storylines in there, and then the thing with Vince trying to pull it down. It just kind of, I think, is kind of like one of those perfect matches to show people about what the Attitude Era was like. It was frenetic. It was not always the bestly handled, but you still loved it anyway. It was just pure entertainment at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. Such a great crowd for it. There's a point as well where JR was so like on it with commentary. They're on the roof of the cell and he's screaming. He is going absolutely insane on his commentary. It's just so engaging.
No, absolutely. I think this is like 2000 was probably the peak year for JR. Again, peak year for JR and King as commentators. Because it wouldn't be long after this that King would be gone for a year due to the thing with his wife getting let go, and we had, which is probably my favorite team of him and Heyman. But yeah, like they're both absolutely on point for this match. It's always one of those things where you hear JR on AW now, and it's still great to hear him. But then you just, especially if you're like you and me who grew up with JR back at this point, you just think whenever you watch the back, you just think, oh, like he was just so perfect a commentator. Like there'll never be another JR.
No, best of all time. I don't think there's anyone who really could dispute that. But yeah, he gets the cowardly win, and then of course to send the fans home happy, you end it with a Stone Cold Stunner and hit his music.
Yep, absolutely. And again, just a great match, and then it's just the fact the stuff that followed after this. I mean, like I said, this is the match that got me into wrestling, and I pretty much watched it like maybe a few days after it happened. So imagine just finding this product, and then you follow that up with the 2001 Royal Rumble, which is probably in contention for the best Rumble of all time. No Way Out, which is just a low-key, really good B pay-per-view, like one of the best, and then the best WrestleMania of all time in WrestleMania 17. So it's easy to see why. Again, a lot of people won't look on this match as fondly, but I do, because this is the match that not only got me into wrestling, but it came at such a perfect time because everything that followed it was just absolute pure gold for the company.
Yeah, 100%.